I'm Maria Bruno, Executive Director of Ohioans Against Extremism, and this is the Ohioans Against Extremism podcast. Today's episode, we are going to play Monday's briefing that we had, which went over the state house bills that most concern us right now. We track all of the state house bills that we care about on our tracker, ohiobills.wtf. And if you visit the website, you'll see there's quite a few bills that we care about. It can be really overwhelming. We know it can be really overwhelming, but the goal of going over the information the way that we will is that you all will at least feel well equipped to advocate around the things you care about. We don't expect you to complete 15 advocacy alerts after this briefing. What we hope that will happen is that at least one of the issues we'll talk about speaks to you and concerns you enough that you will actually take advantage of the opportunity to make your voice heard. We hope that you'll fill out the action alert. We hope that you'll follow along with the organizations that are leading on the bill that you care about. And we hope that you'll get a little bit more involved in advocacy because we will not be able to stop this unless we all band together to do it. Today's session will discuss a variety of different pieces of legislation. It also was my own personal first experience in trying to record webinars for this purpose. So we had a little bit of technical difficulties and we accidentally started not quite at the beginning. So I'm actually going to do the first slides over again so that you all can have all of the information that we went over on Monday. So without further ado, let me get started with WTF is going on at the Ohio Statehouse. Today's agenda will be, first, we're going to start with kind of the zoomed out version. What is the larger agenda here? What is the 10,000 foot view of the 136 General Assembly? And then we're going to go over some key bills and priorities. And then, of course, we're going to go over some ways to take actions, and then we'll answer some questions. There is a larger agenda at play here. You know, there are multiple ways that this legislature is trying to essentially follow a framework to undermine our free and fair democracy. A lot of that has to do with sort of going after the means of production of that free and fair democracy. That means changing voting rules. It means undermining separation of power and conflating national and local issues. So, for example, they're doing a lot of things to try to control voting and elections. They have this really bad voting bill you're about to hear about. There is an effort to altogether abolish the Ohio Elections Commission, which would make it really hard to enforce different existing election rules. They also have a proposal to altogether get rid of the elected members of our State Board of Education. Each of these is an opportunity to take decision-making power away from voters and undermine who can participate in elections altogether. The second thing that they are doing a lot of is coercive compliance. These lawmakers know a lot of their policies that they're pushing are not popular, especially in cities that frankly have a lot of economic power, our big major metro areas in Ohio. So instead of, staying in their lane on state policy stuff, they essentially try to coerce these localities, school systems, these other institutions to behave in a certain way or lose out economically. So they threaten funding for sanctuary cities. They threaten funding for schools that still carry diversity initiatives. They are doing their best to essentially force their policy priorities onto institutions that really should have the independence to decide for themselves what is appropriate and what makes the most sense. And finally, the last is mirroring federal and state policy. Ohio is in a lot of ways the testing ground for a lot of the bad policy that you end up seeing in other states. We are often the first state to have questionable legislation introduced. We are seen as a bellwether state. We are seen as a place that if you can get it through in Ohio, you can get it through in a lot of other places. And that's not a good thing, honestly. It means that they are constantly trying to push boundaries. And because of a locked-in supermajority, they are able to take things very far legislatively, whether or not the general public in Ohio agrees with it. And so similar to some of the federal issues, we are seeing similar attacks at the state level. So attacks on immigrant communities, attacks on education, attacks on diversity. all of the things that we're hearing about with, the federal government, they're bringing those conversations and unfortunately their legislation at the state level too. Now let's zoom out and look at the 10,000 foot view of the 136 General Assembly. This is a 2-year long term. It is a eventful 2 years, and often when you're in the middle of it, it can be hard to remember what the sort of seasons for things are. And so this is a zoomed out picture, and what you'll see is, January 2025, everything starts from scratch. There are 0 bills, there is 0 budget. Everyone enters January 2025, gets in, and one of the first things that'll happen is the governor announces his budget priorities. That's sort of the first round of negotiation. That's the opening offer, so to speak. Then you'll actually have the House legislate and have committee hearings and all that stuff, and they passed a budget in April. From April to June 30th, it's a sprint. It is everyone trying to get their budget priorities in the bill or trying to get bad things taken out of the budget bill. And we will all leave sometime in June, probably towards the end of June. And then we will all take a summer break and hopefully sleep. And now Rachel's going to pick up where I'm leaving off.
By the end of June, there will be a summer break, which will be lovely. The legislators will give us all a little summer break. They will come back at some point, likely in September, though there are rumors they could come earlier to do congressional redistricting because the maps that were created in 2021 did not get the bipartisan support that they need to go for 10 full years. So we're going to have to go through a congressional redistricting process again this year. Should be give us lots to talk about. Then there will be election day, which is going to be obviously all of that going on throughout the summer. Some huge school board races and other local races happening this year that are very important in terms of combating extremism. We're seeing lots of Moms for Liberty type candidates looking at local school board elections. So that is important this year. There will be a little bit of a break, but then a lot of work happening in 2026. Right alongside the major elections, there will also be legislative work, bills happening. There will be a summer break again right before the election next year. And then we will have our lame duck session, which if any of you were paying attention at the end of last year, you know how chaotic that is. So all of this has to happen in the next, what is now a year and a half. And as we sit here in the budget cycle, I can't comprehend anything beyond the budget. So looking at this is good for me, but also scary. All right, so now we're going to talk through some of the key bills and policies that are moving right now at the State House level. Really excited also to have some partners on who are going to talk us through some of the details of some of these. But basically, we're going to go over what's called we're calling it the Ohio SAVE Act, which is a huge threat to voting rights in Ohio. We're going to talk through some of the marijuana bills that would basically change around what Ohioans voted for on issue 2. And then the K-12 diversity ban, which is exactly what it sounds like. Several immigration bills that are being introduced, and then lots of pieces of the state budget, the larger bill, some pieces within that we'd like folks to know about. All right, and I'm first now going to throw it over to friend Mia Lewis from Common Cause Ohio, who knows more about these bills, the Ohio SAVE Act, than anyone else in the state.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone knows more than Rachel, but I just want to give you a summary. This summary on the page you have, and there's the link there to Rachel's amazing document, which does summarize all the bad things about the bill. But we will send so you have the link to that one pager. There's another one pager, which I think is under the resources on that document. So you really just need that one bit.ly and you'll get all these other information. But I wanted to say overall that we're calling it the Ohio SAVE Act because, of course, there's a federal SAVE Act, which has to do with documentary proof of citizenship in order to register. And that is mirrored in this bill, Senate Bill 153, and its companion House Bill 233. But there really are three buckets of harm that we have to look out for. Attacks on voters, attacks on the direct democracy process, being able to bring issues to the ballot and get around the State House, and attacks on the Board of Elections. So as far as attacks on voters, like the SAVE Act, the overall impact of this bill would be to shrink the size of the electorate, basically to prevent people from being able to vote, because it creates this very difficult process to verify citizenship that would prevent tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of eligible Ohioans from casting their ballot. This was tried in Kansas, for example. It's been tried in other states. And they actually went back and took that, trying to have people prove citizenship before they register to vote, because it doesn't work and it ends up excluding eligible voters. They found that about 12% of their voters were unable to register because not everybody has not everyone has a passport, not everyone has access to their birth certificate. Some people have changed their names, all of these things. So what this would do in Ohio would mean that pretty much we would only be able to have registration at the BMV or the Board of Elections. So that means no more registration drives. Online registration, they say that it would continue, but it would be much changed and it would be very awkward. You'd have to mail in copies of your documents and, basically it wouldn't work. And this bill would also target anyone who has any kind of mismatch between what's at the BOE and what's at the BMV. And this would even be like you have your middle initial on your license, but not on your registration, or you've moved and your address isn't the same, or you said Michael on one document and Mike on another document, or your name is hyphenated and it isn't hyphenated in another place. So all of those people would have to vote provisionally. And, not only would they have to vote provisionally, but then they would have to go to the BMV and sort that issue out and then go back to cure their ballot. Ohio already has one of the worst provisional ballot rates. Last year in November, we had 34,000 Ohioans whose provisional ballots were thrown out. And that number would just skyrocket if SB 153 were to pass. Ohioans could be flagged at any time, but basically the bill requires constant checking of the voter rolls by the BOE to match with the BMV. And if there are any problems, then people could be flagged. And if they get mailed something and they don't respond, their registration could be canceled. And also, they actually, if they don't respond to that mailing, that could be submitted for prosecution. I mean, how many little cards from the BOE end up on the floor in someone's apartment building? It looks like junk mail. Their registration is canceled and then they're sent for prosecution because they haven't come in to sort out a tiny mismatch, or they haven't shown proof of citizenship. Okay, so that's the first bucket. That is the harms to voters, the harms to direct democracy. Direct democracy is our ability to collect signatures and put an issue on the ballot directly from us to the people going around the State House. And, we fought back an attack on it in August 2023. And this brings back some of the same, the desire basically to make it harder to get something on the ballot. So one thing it would do is it puts everyone who's on the ballot committee and all the circulators in a kind of weird legal jeopardy, because they would be required to come in and testify about the ballot initiative if requested, and they would have to waive their rights. So they sign away their rights and they say that they're open to political investigations, which is just a way of intimidating volunteers who want to get involved with a ballot initiative. It also increases the number of reasons why why petition booklets can be thrown out. Little nitpicky things. If you make a correction, then that whole booklet gets thrown out. In other words, it's already an incredibly difficult process to get something on the ballot. It just makes it harder. It also requires that compensated people who are circulating books who are compensated have to wear a badge, but it doesn't define compensated. So if you get a piece of pizza at a volunteer kickoff, maybe that's compensation. Maybe you also have to wear a badge. And I think one of the worst things, and I'm sorry, this is such a long list, one of the worst things is that it requires that if any person signing the petition, if they need to update their registration or they need to register to vote, they have to do that update or registration before they sign. So in other words, you're out collecting signatures and someone says, oh, I moved, I need to update my registration. You have to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You need to go to the BOE and you need to update your registration there. Then you need to come back out and search around the city and see if you can find anybody else with the petition booklet. Not very likely to happen. And then finally, it attacks the Board of Elections. It gives them a huge pile of, work that they have to do, record keeping, list maintenance, provisional ballot process, petition validation, all of those things without giving them any more resources or helping them in any way. It also bans drop boxes, which are really helpful to the boards of elections. And so it's another problem for them. So in sum, there are many things that you can do about this. And again, all of these links are on the document that is on the slide there and that we're sharing with you. You can call your state senator. Common Cause has an action for that. You can email your legislators and committee members. League of Women Voters has an action for that. You can sign up to say you're interested in testifying. Ohio Voter Rights Coalition has a link for that. You can have your organization join a sign-on letter that the Fair Districts and We Are Ohio are getting together organizations. We've already got way over 100. Please join us. You can write a letter to the editor. And Rachel also has contact info for all the committee members for you to be able to, call them and talk about this bill. Apologies for such a long list of things, but honestly, they've packed a lot into this bill and it does attack a lot of things. But that's it. I'm done. Happy to answer any questions.
No need to apologize. It is not you who made this bill, and it is we need to know about it. You can all tell why this bill is truly one of our top priorities because it would just gut our voting population in Ohio. And thank you for telling us about it, Mia. All right, let's see here. So I am also going to now throw it over to Maria, who got some great info from ACLU Ohio about the 2 bills that would impact marijuana law in Ohio.
All right, me again. Yes. So I got the download from the ACLU of Ohio. So this information comes from them, and they are also the folks with the action alert that I'll throw in the chat momentarily. But the short version is there are 2 companion bills related to marijuana. SB 56 was the first one. HB 160 is the second. Both of them radically alter the law that was passed by voters in issue 2 in 2023. What you need to understand is that this recriminalizes marijuana. It would make smoking a vape as a passenger in a car subject you to a 3 days in jail mandatory penalty. If you pass your friend weed at a party, that is illegal. When we talk about this recriminalizing marijuana, we mean this in the most minute sense of the word. It also cuts the social equity jobs program entirely. I will be honest with you, they are not optimistic that that's going to be able to be put back in if something is passed. It also goes after local tax revenue. The original issue 2 has a portion of its funds going towards local governments for various things. This would instead send the money to the general revenue fund, which is basically the giant pot of money that the legislature controls. So apparently there have been some conversations over, the fact that the legislature plans to or hopes to send that money ultimately to the localities, but it's far from guaranteed. And we know how folks play games with money here. So it's not great that this would send the money elsewhere. Because there are 2 bills, it is possible that either of those could end up being the vehicle that actually continues to move forward. SB 56 is further along in the process because it already passed the Senate, which would mean even if it was changed in the House, it would be a quicker process to get it through the Senate as well. But HB 160 is still very much alive. The other thing is they could put it in the state budget, which also makes it a little bit hairy to challenge. But we also know, though, that line item vetoes are a thing. And this clearly has economic, financial strings attached. So that would be something that would be relevant. The rumor is that something is passing before the summer, whether we like it or not. I want to be clear that nothing needs to pass. Like, there is no like obligation that they need to pass a bill before they move to the summer. This is purely a political appetite to pass something before. But I have heard that there is hesitation, at least from some Republicans, around the recriminalization part that is, of course, so draconian. So it's worth calling both your representatives and your senators. And Rachel, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. So we're going to tell you basically a lot of horrible things today and then give you action items. I promise there will be actions. So another bill that we are dealing with in the legislature is the K-12 diversity ban. It is literally exactly what it sounds like. The title is there in the top right. This bill would prohibit diversity, equity, and inclusion in public schools, which is, of course, not defined in the bill. It is incredibly broad to the point where there are concerns that it could impact entire communities that are covered by federal protections. So there's concern that students with IEPs could be considered diversity and inclusion because they have different needs for how they learn, different resources required to help them learn. There's a concern that it would impact students who are normally covered under federal disability laws. So there is just very deep concern about how broad this bill is. It is two bills as well, just like several of the other ones. The one that seems to be moving at the moment is Senate Bill 113, the Senate version. It's already had a second hearing in the Senate Education Committee. But House Bill 155 also recently had a hearing, so it's possible they will move them together. There is, again, you will see a theme here, a rumor that this bill could be added to the state budget, potentially even added to the state budget with tied to school funding in some way, where they could threaten the funding or some portion of funding for schools that try to continue having diversity. So this bill is very concerning for many reasons. Only one of them being how broadly written it is. This also just continues on with these attacks that we are seeing nationwide and across Ohio at the university level on attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are people who are telling us that this fight is just, it's gotten too big and that this is one that is lost and we will never feel that way. So this is a fight worth having, especially with this bill where it is so directly, so bluntly attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion and nothing else. No one can argue that this bill does anything else. So that really gives us a good messaging opportunity to talk to legislators and say, do you really want to be on the record opposing diversity? Ask them what the opposite of diversity is. Ask them what the opposite of inclusion is. Really, we can use this bill to call out politicians in a way that was harder than with Senate Bill 1, because Senate Bill 1 included more things. This bill, they can't escape what this bill does. And I think that gives us a real messaging opportunity. So we are going to continue to fight these bills, not only because they're too broad, but because fighting for diversity is the essence of standing against extremism. So yeah, here we are. We are going to, and we have some calls to action, and we will share later in the slideshow. If you are interested in this bill in particular, there are lots of actions you can take. One is preparing to testify if that's something you're going to want to do, or there's legislators you can call in case this bill ends up in the budget. So we've got lots of angles that we are taking to try and stop these bills based on where it ends up. And then we have a whole host of immigration bills. Like Maria talked about, there is definitely a theme where national policy is trickling down into state policy. So we have just seen an avalanche of bills be introduced that are direct attacks on our immigrant communities. Interestingly, most of these bills are moving very slowly in comparison to several of the other bills that are moving. It's possible that the budget is kind of just taking up all the oxygen in the room essentially right now, and that I guarantee some of them will move. But it is also possible that some of them were introduced kind of as talking points for the legislators who want to look extreme to their bases. So that is a hope that we will not have to fight every single one of these bills. You do see that some of them seem to do similar things, like House Bill 26 and House Bill 200. Both have very similar language around requiring law enforcement to comply and assist with federal immigration policy, punishments for law enforcement that refuses, punishment for local government that refuses to help with federal policy. So it's very possible that some of these bills were basically politicians who wanted credit for being anti-immigration, which is problematic in its own right. Senate Bill 5 is also an interesting one because this bill is based around a conspiracy theory. There has been some far right talking points in the far right news, I say in quotes, networks, that basically claim that immigrants were coming illegally to America and stealing people's property by squatting in their homes and in their property, and then somehow, because of loopholes in the law, acquiring that property. It is entirely false, entirely based around conspiracy theories, and we are now seeing legislation connected to that. So because that was based around a far right messaging point, it's possible that essentially the legislators will lose interest in it. So we will have to see which of these bills move forward. We are also very concerned about HB 42 because it includes so many institutions, including potentially schools, that would be required to collect and report immigration data around students. So there's lots of these that we are going to need to be fighting potentially simultaneously. We will see if any of them try to get snuck into the budget or if this is something they move forward with closer to election times. So all of these are listed in our bill tracker, which we'll share with you here in a little bit. And all of them we've got calls to action around all of them. And we will note when each of them begin to move. All right. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is pieces of the budget. And like someone mentioned earlier, some of these slides will be in my presentation tonight as we also talk through how the budget process operates. But wanted to let you know that because we are in this state budget process, a lot of the oxygen is being taken up by individual pieces of the massive budget bill. The operating budget bill is often thousands of pages long. And so we basically pull pieces from it that we want to advocate for and against. So everything in the next couple of slides is all part of the same bill technically, but when you call or testify, you are testifying on just an individual piece. So it's a little bit confusing, but it is incredibly important. Every major item that could ever potentially have money connected to it is in the budget. So we are fighting for schools and libraries and healthcare and so much more. So in the budget right now, one of the number one fights going on is the fight on whether or not to fund our public schools, essentially. So Matt Huffman, who's featured there in the photo, he is the House Speaker. He has made it very clear publicly for years now that he does not believe in our public school system. He wants to move us towards privatization, towards charters and religious schools, toward micro schools and homeschooling. He just does not believe in the public school system. And he is now in a position to try to make that happen. So he is essentially using a very popular message by saying that school funding is unsustainable. We can't throw money at the problem anymore. We have to cut school funding. There's just no getting around it, which of course is not how the rest of us on this call would probably feel, because we have been watching for many years now the school funding fight to create a constitutional school funding system in Ohio. There was a few years back a large group of bipartisan legislators, Republicans and Democrats, and tax experts and policy experts who got together and fought for years and debated and edited and rewrote this plan, the Fair School Funding Plan, to fund our schools constitutionally. And we are supposed to be in the middle, year 4 of 6 of implementing that plan right now. So the argument that school funding is unsustainable is really is not necessarily the only argument to be made. In fact, I would call it untrue. So what we have been arguing against say that we need to cut school funding is by talking about priorities. So one of the things the budget does is it would give $600 million, which actually would end up being more of money in the budget to fund a new stadium for the Browns, for the Cleveland Browns, while still saying that public education funding is unsustainable. So we can make the argument that students should be the priority, that spending on our schools and our kids should be the priority before we fund sports stadiums. Another argument that you can make is that Ohio right now is spending nearly $1 billion every year on vouchers to private and religious schools. So this is money, all education money comes from the same pot of money. So every dollar that goes to these vouchers for these private and religious schools is money that could be going to the public schools if, again, we prioritized the public schools where 90% of kids attend. So the argument, again, is we could be spending money on the schools that most students attend, public money for public schools, rather than these hundreds of millions of dollars for private school vouchers. There has been new data that came out recently that showed that most of the people who use the vouchers are actually not low income. So the goal of the vouchers is no longer being met. We've also seen data showing that most of the people using the voucher money were already sending their kids to private schools, and now they're just doing it for free. So it is our fight continues on messaging around the fact that it is not true that it's unsustainable to fund public schools, but that we could find the money if we wanted to. Here is one example of many of where we could find that money. Another big piece of this, again, this is all the school funding fight in the budget, is the fact that they're trying to expand the universal voucher piece even further in the budget. So they're trying to give more money to vouchers, and they're trying to add who can get this money in new ways. One of the ways they're trying to do it is Senate Bill 68, which has now been added to the budget bill, which would create what's called educational savings accounts for non-chartered, non-public schools, which are totally unregulated religious schools. Basically, these savings accounts are even more broad and even less regulated than universal vouchers. Basically, parents who participate in this program would get a spending account full of your tax dollars, and that money could be spent on anything. They could argue that taking their kids on a field trip to the Creation Museum is their education for the week. And like that is, they could do whatever they want with it. It is truly unregulated. It can be used on far more than just tuition, which is what the vouchers cover. So it would be more money that is not going to the public schools being sent to we don't know where to be used on unregulated religious schools. It really is, again, a priorities issue. So one of the many things we can do about it. We've got another bit.ly link for you all, bit.ly/Ohio Fair School Funding. Shout out to Honesty for Ohio Education for that one. They have lots of calls to action on there. One of the main calls to action for this particular moment in time is there is public testimony on school funding that is being heard this Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. So testimony, if you are interested in submitting public testimony, to demand the Fair School Funding Plan, or to demand that they stop spending public dollars on private schools. That testimony is due by tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. And there's lots of pieces in the bit.ly link with talking points, with messaging ideas, with a template for how to submit testimony. So if that is something, if the last few slides have really fired you up, this is an action that you can take today to help fight for this public school money for public schools. And then another piece of this budget that we're dealing with, so this is again the large budget bill, a piece of the budget, also comes with its own bit.ly link, Save Ohio Libraries. We have seen just the House put in historic cuts to libraries in the state budget. They not only cut the library funding by a huge amount, they also actually removed the public library fund, which is the piece of the budget that promises libraries some percentage of funding every month, every year, so that they can budget properly, they can prepare. The libraries did an incredible job pushing back and getting public outrage, so getting people to call in. And they did have a little bit of a victory on this, which is the legislators put the words public library fund back in the budget, which is a start, but they didn't put any money connected to it. Basically, the legislators can still decide year to year, probably even month to month, what the budget for the libraries would look like. So that is not acceptable because they could fund it at zero. They could fund the libraries at $0 if they wanted. So our ask is essentially to put the library fund back at a certain percent of the state fund so that every month, every year, the libraries know what percent of money they're going to be getting so they can prepare. So we're not even asking anymore to increase the library fund. We're literally just asking them to put it back at 1.7% of the state fund, state GRF. So that is we've got lots and lots of people you can contact in that bit.ly link, making that same general ask to not only put the public library fund back, but put back a percent of the state money so that libraries can know month to month how much money they will have to budget properly. And this and both of these actually, you will see in the links that we have shared. There's going to be lots of asks of the rural and Appalachian legislators because both school funding and the library funding, those fights are going to need to be had largely by rural Republicans and Appalachian Republicans. We need them to stand up to their leadership because their districts would be just really, really hurt by both of these programs being cut. Rural areas don't have private schools. They don't have voucher religious schools. They tend to have the local public school that everyone attends. On Friday night, everybody goes to the local public high school football game. It's part of the community. So we need rural Republican legislators to have the courage to stand up to their leadership, and that is going to come from public pushback on them. So a lot of the bit.ly links you will see, the calls to action are directed at those particular legislators. And now I'm going to turn it over to Danielle DeLeon Spires from Ohio Poverty Law Center to talk to us about a couple other pieces in the budget around Medicaid and healthcare.
Thank you. Yes, I will try to explain it without you falling into the alphabet soup that healthcare advocates kind of can fall into. But these are very technical pieces that will have big impacts on everybody, and we are fighting very hard against. So I will start with the Medicaid trigger language. I think it's the first slide up, please. Thank you. So this one has to do with like Rachel mentioned earlier, we are seeing a lot of federal policy trickle down to the state level. So this is trigger language that could immediately impact Ohio's Medicaid expansion population. What does that mean? So Ohio has the Group 8 expansion population. You may have seen discussion about this population earlier in the year because Ohio is also applying for a work requirement waiver, which is a topic for a whole nother time that I could really, really get into the weeds on that one too. But something we fought earlier this year, though that is at the federal government level now. But so this is the low income, able-bodied adults without dependence population. These are individuals who received Medicaid coverage under the ACA expansion. So these are individuals that the income level goes up to 138% of the federal poverty level, which we know, 138%. I've got a couple numbers here. So that's a 21,000 income for a singular person, family of 3. That's 36,000. But so basically what's been put into the budget, and these kind of went a little under the radar because they are technically included in the section of the budget under the Office of Budget and Management. But it comes up in the Medicaid committees. Medicaid Director Corcoran has testified on these. So the federal level, there's something called FMAP. It's the federal Medicaid assistance percentage, which is how much of the Medicaid costs are covered by the federal government, with the state covering the remainder. There's a different FMAP for kind of the general population, but what we're talking about is this Group 8 expansion. So we get 90% FMAP. And so we know on the federal level, Congress has been told cut just astronomical amounts out of the HHS budgets, out of Medicaid, and there's just really no way to do it. The numbers don't really add up. So basically, Ohio is trying to get in front of that, is what we've heard, and say if the federal government says we are going to lower that FMAP from 90%, that will immediately allow the state to end Medicaid expansion. So we've got some numbers there as of right now, and this is, if this was implemented with everybody receiving proper notice and making sure that no one was getting wrapped up in this would still be almost 800,000 Ohioans who would be losing healthcare coverage. That's, individuals with chronic conditions, employers, and there's a lot of coalition talk about, what does that mean from a monetary standpoint? But we have been looking at, this is a population of Ohio that, we are hearing if would immediately end healthcare coverage. And that is if it at all drops below 90%. So a lot of the conversation is, are you saying even if it drops to 89, they're going to cut it? And the answer is currently yes. And so it says immediately discontinue. What we've been advocating for is for these provisions to be removed, entirely, or change it in a way to kind of stay in the conversation. Could you change it to permissive? And so what Medicaid has said is, any changes made to the program would need to be a combination of state action, federal action. Everybody would be, in the conversation, but we are still looking at a large cut to healthcare. So that has been put into the budget. Rachel's got here what section of the budget is there. And so we are just asking for people to remove that. And then there is a second provision that is a little bit different, but still equally dangerous. And this one has gone a little bit more under the radar because it's confusing as all get out, probably intentionally. So we're kind of referring to it as the federal mirror language, and it allows Ohio to take whatever action you see on the federal government for a program and do the same thing in the state. So if the federal government cuts, pauses, suspends, reduces anything on their level, if Ohio has a state program that's the same program that uses federal funding, they can do that exact same thing. Like I said, what does that mean? Nobody really knows, but some of the conversation has been about the Children's Health Insurance Program. Kind of seems to be the unspoken thing. So, there's the state Children's Health Insurance Program that's matching funds to states for health insurance for families with children. This is families who have incomes that, that are too high to qualify for Medicaid. And again, we see what the income levels for Medicaid are. So, still not earning a living wage, but health insurance would otherwise be out of their reach. Again, like I said, it's not explicitly laid out that that's the program, but that's just one of the many examples of why we're advocating for this language to be taken out, because the impact is immediate, it's far reaching, and it just, is dangerous to a lot of Ohioans who could lose their healthcare coverage. So happy to answer any questions or, provide more detail. Like I said, these are two provisions that are a little more technical in what we're asking for, but the Senate Medicaid Committee will be hearing public testimony at 9 a.m. this Thursday.
Oh, yes. Thank you for mentioning that, Danielle. We are going to have a call to action coming out here soon that is urging folks to submit testimony to remove these two different pieces. So if anyone is interested in that, that link is coming soon as well. We are grateful that they're having that testimony on Thursday, so we get like a day to prepare. So if you have questions on these, throw them in the chat. I want to make sure we get through these slides, and then we will quickly, hopefully, get to some questions as well. All right, so this one is from our friends at Ohio. This is, again, a piece of the budget. So this is all I know at the budget. I'm so sorry, everyone. I promise we have calls to action around these as well. It's not all just depression. So the Ohio Housing Trust Fund is at risk. So this is the main form of funding that is used for local homelessness and affordable housing projects. And this would at the moment in the current budget, it would be removed. So there would be obviously significantly less funds and fewer funds that are promised year to year to programs that help prevent and address homelessness and lack of housing. So this is a call to action from our friends at Ohio, and that is also in our budget tracker, which we will share with you as well. You can tell I'm moving a little fast because I want to make sure we get through so we can answer some questions. And then I'm going to throw it over to Maria real fast, who's going to talk through this piece of the budget that you will likely hear about from a coalition of folks here very shortly if it stays in the budget.
Yes. So this provision is a little bit wonky. I'm actually going to throw, after I stop talking, I'll throw an article in the chat that kind of goes over it. But the long story short of it is when you are trying to find misbehavior by public officials, one of the best ways to go about doing that is to be able to follow an investigation from start to finish and be able to have the public have access to those records. Similarly, if there is even a private citizen that has, let's say, a pattern of behavior, sometimes incident reports and personal notes and other things that can provide a pattern, are only available through public records. So a lot of the times when we're talking about citizen journalists, when we're talking about civil litigation against police officers, when we're talking about general sunshine law access, we need the public to have access to these public records. They have slipped a provision into the budget, which heavily limits the ability to get these records at all. The Ohio Innocence Project and many other victim advocates and wrongful conviction advocates and all of the folks that follow along very closely with that criminal justice system are very concerned about this, because the first thing to do if you want to hide misbehavior is limit access to the ability to find that information at all. And these provisions really do take a hatchet to some of the most reliable resources in finding some of that information, whether it's police misbehavior or just other patterns of behaviors, or even alternative theories of the case, right? Like if there is someone who's having the law thrown at them, if there is a problem with the incident or arrest process, those are a lot harder to find if you can't access those records. So it really is a slippery slope to a more fascist government if we were to have this kind of limits on public access of records. But again, as Rachel mentioned, there is a coalition of groups that are working to fight this.
Yes. All right. So there's lots going on. One last thing before we talk through what you can actually do about it. Note that there is a piece of the budget that would get rid of all the elected state board of education members. We are already in a place where the state has cut the rights and the abilities and the powers of the state board of education, and now would completely get rid of the elected board members and all of the board members. It would be a smaller board, and all members would be appointed by the governor. So just again, coalescing power around one of the branches of government, taking power away from the citizens. We are seeing this as a theme, making it harder to vote, making it harder to access citizen ballot initiatives, and making it so that there are fewer things that citizens can actually vote on, is all part of the theme that Maria talked about earlier at the beginning of the presentation. All right, so what the heck can you do? We have this ongoing bill tracker, ohiobills.wtf. I had to spend a couple extra dollars to make it WTF, and it was worth it because I giggle every time. So this tracker is updated regularly, several times a week, with calls to action that we hope are simple, that you can take throughout your day, that you can take even if this is not something that you do in your daily life. Hopefully you can just make a call or send an email or submit some testimony very fast. And these are going to be constantly updated with all the bills we talked about today, all the budget pieces, and many others. And we very much love pulling resources from our amazing partners. So if our partners have a toolkit or a call to action link that they are sharing, we will add it into this website as well. So I'm going to quickly show you how it works. I'm not fancy, it's a Google Doc, but it is a link to Google Doc. Basically, we list our priorities at the top, but your priorities might be different. So we've had some folks ask for us to help them figure out which things to focus on, because there's a lot in this document. So that's why we created this top piece. If you just quickly want a couple priorities for the week, those are listed there for you. Or you can scroll through and it will note which items are moving this week, which items have hearings this week, or which ones need the quickest action. That will be noted. And we start with positive things. There are lots of bills we do want to support, so those are listed first, so you can pick some good items for you or your members. And basically, if you click on a link, any of the linked items, it will take you down further in the document. So I'm going to click on a link here to the Save Act, and it takes you down further into the document to a piece that it'll have the status report for the item, it'll have toolkits and links from partners, and then actions to take. So you can see OVRC has a sign up where you can say you're interested in testifying against the Ohio Save Act. There's a really great toolkit also that from All Voting is Local, and OVRC that lets you write a letter to the editor and helps you do that. And you can even contact them for help with writing your letter to the editor. So there's several calls to action. You can just pick the ones that you think are in your wheelhouse and do those. We again want to make this as simple as possible for you all. And then a reminder, if someone who is passionate about stopping the Ohio Save Act, for that bit.ly link, it has lots of calls to action, including the many amazing links that Mia shared from Common Cause, from the League of Women Voters. We are taking the lead from these amazing voting rights groups in Ohio that are doing this work. And then want to talk to you quickly about the SB1 referendum. So this is Ohio Senate Bill 1, the Higher Education Destruction Act that was signed into law, but the fight is not over. So there are several things that folks are doing to try and stop this bill from being implemented. One of the big ones is a referendum push. So the Youngstown State University faculty they've set up a website, and they are now at the point where they are certified to collect signatures statewide. So that means they need hundreds of thousands of signatures to put SB1 on the ballot, to have voters overturn it at the ballot. So if you go to that website, you can sign up to volunteer, you can find places to sign the petition, you can donate, which will be huge because this is a grassroots effort. And then you can also contact them directly if you want to help, or if you have ideas for how to get the word out for them as well. It's an entirely grassroots run effort to overturn SB1, and really impressive work by these folks. So get involved any way that you can, because the action items are how we find our hope, is by taking action instead of just doom scrolling. So I think at this point, yes, I am going to open it up to all the different panelists, and we would love to answer your questions. I don't know who has access to read the questions in the chat, but we can all answer them for you over the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, we are learning some things in real time about our tech process here. And so if you have a question, you can either raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can put it in the chat and we can answer it. Some of the panelists have chat access. Some of them have the ability to actually turn on their cameras at this moment. Again, we're figuring this out the hard way. So yeah, feel free to throw some questions in the chat. Rachel, I'm going to read them off to you because I assume you maybe don't have access. So
Right.
First, we have a idea to get some Cavalier basketball players to tweet about the Save Act. Any thoughts?
I love it. If anyone knows any, I'd love to ask them to do this. That is a constant. So that's actually, we had some help from some pro basketball players with, I think it was the redistricting fight, but we do have some ties. But if anyone has ties to any Ohio influencers who are potentially not political, that is always something we are looking for. If you have ties to a music, like an artist, that is absolutely something we're looking for. We would just need those connections and are happy to make the ask.
Another question we have is it better to email legislators individually or as a group?
Great question. So I believe it individually is best. One thing we've heard a lot is the Republican legislators, especially, have been saying that they're getting form emails and they don't believe they're real. So your email needs to come from you, probably to an individual legislator, and you can use obviously talking points and messaging ideas from organizations, but it needs to be your own words, so that they cannot ignore you because they cannot tell themselves that it's a fake email. So the more personalized you can make it, the better.
I second that. And I'll also say personalized doesn't have to mean long. It can
No,
be short.
absolutely. Absolutely. Short is honestly better because they'll read it.
Yeah. We have a reminder from Mia to, if you are in the city of Columbus, please make sure you sign on to the Columbus Safety Collective initiative. They are collecting petitions to create an avenue for emergency non-police response in Columbus. We're really excited about it. OAE is one of the many supporting groups, so definitely shout out to that. And if you are in city of Columbus, please consider helping. We also have a message from Glenn, who reminds us that to please support the SB1 repeal effort. You can volunteer, you can donate money to it. I will just second that. I think it's fantastic to see this group of professors put this together and put some pressure on lawmakers and kind of illustrate direct democracy so beautifully. Okay, Rachel, we have a question about HB 188 in our, would we be willing to add it?
I don't know. I'd need to know what it is.
Yeah, Eliza, if you want me to unmute, I can, or you can throw it in the chat if you want to offer some additional context. Already above. Okay, let's see.
Cool.
Let me look here.
I have to look into it for sure.
HB 188. Oh, here we go. Interesting. To create the Ohio-Israel Trade and Innovation Partnership and to make an appropriation of $5 million 1 year, another $5 million the following. This would have the Ohio governor, lieutenant positions, and the General Assembly appoint the 17 people in charge. And Eliza cites that it marginalizes and undermines the rights of Palestinians and disproportionately empowers powerful. So we will look into that one, Eliza, and can't speak because I haven't seen it directly, but thank you for that information. We'll definitely look into it. And if other folks have thoughts and or other bills that are not yet on their tracker, please feel free to speak up. Rachel, any thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been really helpful having folks let us know about bills because there are absolutely going to be ones that I missed. So please, yeah, keep letting us know.
Yeah, we do our best, but there are quite a few. One more question. What does the DEI attack bill do for Ohio according to Republicans? What are their talking points, Rachel? That's a good question.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so basically the argument, partially I will say that nationally there is a push against DEI, the 3 letters, not the actual, like they don't talk about what the words stand for. And it is part of a national push against DEI. There is a belief that is based, I will say, on a misunderstanding of what DEI is. That it is basically giving people a boost that other people don't get based entirely on race. So they often misinterpret the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion involves dozens, probably hundreds of different communities of people. They focus exclusively on race. And they then say that because of that, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts are racist because they support only certain races of people. And it is truly based on a misunderstanding of what diversity, equity, inclusion is. And I would say that more than anything, the legislators that are pushing these bills do not believe that it will make the state better, but that they are stopping something bad. They believe that they will create an equal playing field by getting rid of DEI efforts, when in reality, we know that these efforts exist because many communities of people, not just race-based, but lots of different communities of people, veterans groups, Appalachian groups. I had a friend who had a DEI program because he was involved in at Ohio State that got him through Ohio State because he was the first person in his Appalachian community to go to college. So all these different groups, we know these groups were historically prevented from accessing programs, historically made it harder for these folks to get through school or to feel included in the classroom, or to get jobs or even get job interviews. And so these programs exist because those folks were being kept out. But that the narrative has completely been lost. It has now become, this is unfair treatment for certain races of people, and we have to level the playing field again. It really is very problematic and hard to even explain what the argument for it is. That was a long answer, but I got a lot of feelings.
Don't we all? Don't we all? Great. Well, thank you so much. We are coming right up at 1, so look at us for almost getting it within that 60-minute range. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email us or reach us on social media or go to our website to learn more. Rachel, any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
No, just thank you so much for our partners who are on today. We really appreciate you and all the partners who sent us information for today as well. Could not be doing it without you all.
Second that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.